All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to have to start. I know that people are still congregating outside, and they'll be trickling in. The reason why we do have to start now is that we have some incredible speakers and the Tomorrow Peacebuilder Awards, and so I want to make sure that everybody has time and that you get to hear them. So if you can, please feel free to move up. I know people like to hang out in the back, but please feel free to move up. Oh, I have a taker. I love it. Okay. So the first thing I would like to do is, this is the hard part. A lot of Peacebuilders work in conflict-affected and fragile states in very dangerous places. So we do this every year. We honor people who have died in their work. And so I'd like to introduce Marika Theros, who will talk about a colleague that was lost this past year.
Thank you. I want to thank the Alliance for Peacebuilding for honoring Hedayatullah Zaheer, or Z as his friends called him. He was a young activist who led a network, which they called the Watan Palazwanin Network, the Youth for the Public Interest, of over 10,000 young people across eastern Afghanistan, one of the most insecure areas that has witnessed a surge in violence, both from the Taliban and IS. Tragically, on May 18th of this year, Z was killed at the tender age of 32, alongside 8 other people at a Ramazan cricket tournament for peace that he had organized. Before I say a few words, however, I'd like to play a short video that was made by his supporters in the aftermath of his killing. So who was Z, and why was he so important to his community and to his country? Above all, Z loved Afghanistan. To him, it was a country of poetry and promise, and despite the endless threats, he had implicit and absolute trust in the potential of the Afghan people, particularly its youth, in bringing about peace. With superhuman dedication and fearlessness that was both awe-inspiring and frightening, his work and that of the network he led zeroed in on the disenfranchisement and the fragmentation which he believed were the drivers of fear and ultimately insecurity and conflict. For Z and the Watan Pala community, sustainable peace would materialize not from an elite peace deal, but only when the young and the bold came together across conflict cleavages and could offer a better pathway, a vision for a better Afghanistan and the means for reaching it. And to do this, Z operated at multiple levels. He was everything to everyone. He was a professional cricketer, he ran a local radio station, and he was a rapid responder to crises by offering assistance to communities in almost real time. In many ways, he acted as a cultural entrepreneur. he held holding large-scale public gatherings for art, poetry, and sports as a way of reaching people, taking back public spaces from those who were trying to destroy them, and creating opportunities for solidarity and inclusivity. And importantly, he made sure that the most isolated rural youth, often from border communities, were present and participating, while also reaching out to local officials and to local security forces to make them listen to their communities, but also to boost their confidence. Through these self-organized activities, they provided people with hope, dignity, and courage to stand together to fight for peace and justice. Z was intense and creative, intensely focused on work, and he was creative in pushing back against those who sowed divisions. Whether it was by organizing a national celebration that brought out over 200,000 people to the streets in Jalalabad despite insecurity, or in holding mass cricket viewings at midnight at an intersection in Jalalabad to reduce tensions and get people together, or in organizing the first Women's Day celebration in Nangarhar, or a public event for Afghan special forces to demonstrate to their community the skills that they had learned. He even put up posters of female police to celebrate their achievements, of course after securing their permission, and passed out scarves with the colors of the Afghan flag in order to instill pride. At times, he was seen as too progressive or forward-looking by elites. At other times, his lack of higher education and a rural background made people dismiss him or exclude him. But even so, he persevered, saying, "Don't worry. Once we show them the outcomes of our work, they will be inspired and they will join us, and they can take all the credit they want so long as they do their part for peace." His persistence, while at times overwhelming, forced people to become their better selves and to do the right thing. Z's style of peace building goes far beyond the Afghan context, and it's really critical for all of us to learn, to really listen, to understand, and to support the work that people like Z do, who take enormous risk and who disregard typical conventions, because they actually are the ones who understand how to operate, and they know how to collaborate and build mutual networks of support across communities, institutions, sectors, and geographies. But mostly Z wanted youth to believe in themselves and in their potential. He helped provide the way for them by creating spaces for interaction and communication to enable this younger generation to expand its horizon, explore its potential, imagine a brighter future, and mostly to put to work their skills and determination behind the public good. He once told me, a dream does not become reality through magic. It takes sweat, determination, and hard work. This our youth can do, but of course, we also have our tricks. We will always mourn Z, the values he represented, and the hard work he did. But our grief is minuscule compared to those of the young men and women of eastern Afghanistan who he empowered. Many believe that the spike in insecurity following his death was a result of his absence. But they also persevered this summer, and they decided to organize and to celebrate National Day and his legacy in public despite the bombings. And this is why we must ensure that his message and vision of peace be carried forward with the same urgency and courage he always demonstrated in his short life. So now is the time to double down on listening to and supporting the brave activists and young people who sacrifice and put their lives at risk for a greater cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Marika. So now is a time to celebrate as well. And I will introduce Bob Berg, who will give out a leadership award to our very own Melanie Greenberg.
Talk about a bittersweet moment. Well, Melanie has devoted her life to peace building. She came to us fully prepared, working with major foundation programs, research at Stanford University, law degree, all these wonderful things that she's done. And we celebrated her arrival. It was just wonderful. Everything was going to be great. Then we had a kind of a financial foundation, a 10-year grant, which was in its third or fourth year. It was wonderful to have that kind of stability, but it turned out about 3 or 4 weeks after she joined the donor decided that there would be a different priority for that money. And away it went. Rip comes out the rug under her, but she recovered and persevered, because she is stronger than she seems, you know. And I totally dedicated to peace building, a fantastic personality, which I have rarely seen in my life, of just total love for people. So many people here have said she's irreplaceable. Do you know, I talked to her once, and she remembered to call me 3 months later to say, how am I doing, da-da-da-da, all that personal appeal and linkages, sincere. And a great institution builder, so that she built a staff who love her. And she built a set of relationships with existing and many new members, and she built a stronger funder base, and she built friends for peace building, and this goodwill for our field has just increased because of her. Melanie has not left the field of peace building, she's just gone on to greater money. Pardon me, glory, I meant, sorry. And she's administering a wonderful program from our friends, with our friends of Humanity United, and I know that she will continue to strengthen our fields. Would you give, oh, I know what I want to do. I want to, this is hokey, but I was born 10 feet away from Hollywood, and what in Hollywood we do is hokey. And so what I'd like to do, you know, happy birthday to you. Well, when the word birthday, instead of that, I want us to give love back to her. So happy love to you. Will you please, in the key of Q, happy love to you, happy love to you, happy love, dear Melanie, happy love to you, and many more.
Oh.
Anybody who knows me well, which is in this room, knows, as my parents said growing up, that my bladder is directly connected with my tear ducts, and that seems to be the case right now. But I just can't tell you just how joyful it is to be in this room with all of you and to see how our family has grown. What people have said to me repeatedly and all day today is, I come here because I feel like it's family. This is my tribe. And to see our peace-building tribe expand the way it has, with everyone who's working with such passion and joy and creativity and innovation around the world during a really difficult time, just nothing in the world could make me happier. So thanks to all of you. And just thinking this morning about the pipe bombs that were delivered, you know, what does peace look like in the United States? And I was teaching a class recently, and one of the students said, well, what was your proudest moment at the Alliance for Peace Building? And it's like choosing among your children. I couldn't choose just one. But hiring me. Absolutely. That was the best decision. It was also a joyful moment. But one of them was right after the recent election and the violence even before the election, was how has our community risen to think about peace here in the US? And not only US citizens, but our friends from around the world who said, we understand polarization, we understand violence, we understand fragmentation, let us come and work with you. I felt such pride at that moment and also hope that our community can do here in the United States what we've done throughout the world, and that also we can learn from everyone who's been through similar times in their history. This is why I'm especially honored to have the award for Peacebuilding Excellence given to a US peace builder, and specifically Paula. I don't want to preempt your introduction, but I entered the peacebuilding field after spending 3 summers on the Experiment International Living, the sister organization to SIT, You have been such a guide and wise role model throughout my career. So to see what you've been doing, connecting Massachusetts and Kentucky to bring peace-building values to the US, I'm so grateful. So thank you all, and please also join me in thanking the entire AFP staff and board. I know from experience this is like water polo. It looks so seamless from the top, but everybody's racing underneath. You've just done a magnificent job, so thank you.
Well, I love the fact that I now don't have to introduce this next award because Melanie she did a brilliant job and was very eloquent of why we decided to name this new award that AFP will be giving out every year, the Melanie Greenberg United States Peacebuilding Award of Excellence. And Bob and I talked about how do we honor this incredible person who led AFP for 7 years. When I first joined AFP about 4 years ago, Melanie had just served on, you were just on jury duty, grand jury duty in the district. And she was just talking about how much conflict and violence was here in our own backyard and how we weren't doing anything about it. Or I shouldn't say we weren't doing anything about it. There are a lot of peace builders working on programming here in the US, but why we weren't doing anything about it, the Alliance, and so that's what we set out to do. So when Bob and I were talking about what is the best way to honor her, we thought giving this award on United States Peacebuilding Award of Excellence and trying to elevate US peacebuilding would be, I think, one of the best ways to honor her. So with that, I would like to tell you who we decided the first group that we would be honoring is Paula Green and Hands Across the Hills. And I just want to say a little bit about it because she's going to talk to you about this amazing program and why we chose this organization. We have started doing a review of peacebuilding programs in the US, and a lot have been popping up. And we are a little concerned that some of the things we're seeing don't have a conflict sensitivity lens, some are doing some harm. What I love about the Hands Across the Hill program is that it took the best peacebuilding approaches and applied them. They are looking at a deep commitment to a community, of using a conflict sensitivity lens, and recognizing that this is going to be a long process. This is not going to be the answer for everything, but it is a part of the solution. And she will talk about it and tell you all about the program. So I can't be more thrilled to give this award to Paula Green and Hands Across the Hills.
It even comes with a plaque. Thank you. This is so special for me. Receiving this award has some historic meaning for me. About 20 years ago, long before AFP, I met in the basement of a home someplace here in the DC area with a group of peace builders, including Louise Diamond, John Marks, other people that the elders here will know from the bad old days before AFP, and we talked about forming an organization. We gave it some very improbable, unpronounceable initials, which fortunately disappeared when AFP became the name, but I feel a real historic link from the very beginning of this organization that eventually became AFP. And being honored in Melanie's name, Melanie, who's done so much for all of us to uplift peace building in this country and around the world, is a tremendous honor for me. That it's kind of the end, the late stage of my career and something that I will deeply cherish. So thank you for that. About 25 years ago, I founded an NGO called Karuna Center for Peacebuilding in Amherst, Mass., and became a professor at the School for International Training, where I taught for a couple of decades and founded the Contact or Conflict Transformation Across Borders program. And I was completely an international peace builder. I had done domestic work when I lived in New York in the early days around race issues, but I had become an international peace builder. And it's a little odd now to be promoting and encouraging U.S. peace building, but the time is right, and I'm glad to be doing it. I stepped down from those responsibilities at Contact and Karuna Center just in time for the 2016 elections. Was not very good timing unless you're looking for your next career, which seems to have come to me in the form of this program, which we call Hands Across the Hills. The challenges that we face now threaten to dismantle everything we've worked on these past 3 or 4 decades in peace building, and it just seems incumbent upon all of us that we put our hands into this U.S. peace building now and use our wisdom and our talent to make the changes that we need here in our own country. So right after the election, friends and I gathered in Amherst, Mass, where I live, and we decided to mourn and organize, which is an old saying from Saul Alinsky. And we didn't know what to do. And someone said, well, let's form a bridging committee and see if we can talk to people who voted differently from the way we did and see what we can learn from that. So we did that, and in these 15 minutes that I have, I'm going to tell you about the organization we formed, some of the peace-building guidelines that I used in creating the organization and guiding it, and a little bit about some personal stories. This is the end of 2 long days, and I'll make it storytelling time so that it's not too heady for us. And I guess one question is, as a peace builder, we have a lot of choices we can make. Why did I choose this way to intervene? Well, I didn't. It chose me. This project just fell into my lap within a month after the elections. It was unformed. It was not articulated. No one quite knew what it meant to have a bridging project. And it fell to me to manifest and shape this program. We call it Hands Across the Hills because we live in Western Massachusetts, which is hilly, and the partner we found lives in Eastern Kentucky, which is hilly. And we first called it Hands Across the Divides, but our partner in Kentucky, who I'll tell you about, said, well, that emphasizes the negative. That emphasizes the divisions. Let's not do that. And then I thought, well, Hands Across the Hills will be a much nicer sounding, sweeter way to name this program. I also knew at the time that the rising dehumanization perceptions of each other and the development of good versus evil narratives was going to be very toxic for our country and very dangerous, and I wanted to intervene at that level. And it seemed to me that to any extent that I could develop a program that would increase connectors and reduce dividers seemed really worth doing. And this kind of work fit my own background, my own sensibilities, my own international work, so off I went. It was very tough to find a local partner. Nobody wanted to talk to us. Our group had just lost an election, and the people we approached had just won an election, and they didn't want to get beat up by a bunch of liberals. So they were not interested in talking to us. And we didn't have very strong connections into conservative communities, and they suspected our motivations. But through an online news feed, we found a wonderful colleague named Ben Fink, who's from Connecticut, but is a community organizer in Eastern Kentucky in the coal region. And he immediately understood what we wanted and decided to become our partner. But the resistance ran high in Kentucky. They like him, they trusted him, but they certainly didn't trust us. They feared a repeat of 100 years of let's go exploit the hillbillies, which is something that they have felt literally for 100 years since coal came into the region. Nell later remarked, "We mountain people are the last group where it is socially acceptable to make fun of us and still think of yourselves as progressive." It's a really powerful statement. It reminds me of what we heard this morning from Donna about repeated dignity violations, which has made them very sensitive to outsiders. But they trusted Ben, and he recruited diligently, and we formed a stable partnership. So I'm going to name a lot of key points for people who want to do peace building in this way. The first one is that it's difficult and essential to find a partner with enough credibility in the local community to attract participants willing to talk to people who they think threaten their values and their way of life. There was about 30 of us, about 15 people on each side from Kentucky and Massachusetts, and I'm accepting the award on behalf of all of them because I think this award belongs to this entire group. Our region of Western Massachusetts is as blue as Eastern Kentucky is red, and each side has very strong stereotypes about the other. We profile differently on many of the indexes, social and economic indexes of class, politics, privilege, education, media consumption, occupation, history, geography, you name it, we're not the same on those indexes. Given those gaps and our mutual agitation about the election, I really had no idea at the outset what might emerge. I do know that the literature says that in contact theory, that specific structures help maximize the development of empathy, and I followed these guidelines, but given the antagonism, I wasn't really sure what might happen. So one is a tightly held, structured container, makes good dialogue possible, and a confidential one. Sufficient time together, variety between formal dialogue and other informal activities, meaningful rather than casual interactions, equal treatment in the dialogue setting. Even if the participants feel unequal in their lives, what you do in the dialogue setting around equality matters a great deal. Some form of cooperation and self-disclosure. So I used those guidelines as I was designing what this would turn out to be. I drew on decades of experience working internationally in far more divided communities. I knew the group would discover common ground and common needs, but I wasn't sure they would find the same satisfiers for those needs. And one interesting story came up. We were talking about guns, and I said to the group, "What makes you feel safe?" And the Massachusetts group said, "Well, it's easy. Nobody has guns." And the Kentucky group said, "It's easy for us if everybody has guns." So it was a really strong example of how different satisfiers emerge, although the common ground was the same. All of us here at AFP understand that dialogue is a tool. It is not a panacea, and it is no substitute for action. But yet the emerging tribalism is something that we do need to deal with. And so it's one approach to dealing with this. We also recognize that divides, if they're not healed, and we've seen this all around the world, become chasms and then cataclysms if not addressed. So I see dialogue as a tool that works side by side with structural change. I believe that it works its way into people's hearts, into their communities, and contributes to greasing the wheels for political and social change that does happen. I've seen it make a great deal of difference in many places that I've worked. For any of this to happen in the kind of asymmetric and polarized groups that I was going to be dealing with between Western Mass and Eastern Kentucky, I created a form that was intensive and immersive. And those are two words that I want to reinforce. And perhaps point number 2 is to consider the powerful usage of a multi-day residential format, which is what I designed, again, based on what I had seen overseas and how well that seems to work. For our Kentucky group, for many, they're not very well traveled. For many, it was their first time in New England. They were brave enough to come up, but they were sure scared. They drove 15 hours in a van to get to where we live, and there was a lot of anxiety about how they would be received. They arrived late at night, it was dark, it was late October, just a year ago now, and we had a lot of welcomes and introductions, and then the hosts and guests left in pairs. All the hosts and guests had been introduced to each other. I paired up people very consciously. It matched them as best as I could, and they had been introduced by telephone, email, Facebook, some kind of communication, so that everybody knew who they were hosting and what kind of a host they were getting. And it's clear to me that the intimacy and vulnerability of homestays really helped to create the trust and the warmth that shaped the experience. So key point number 3, include thorough and collaborative preparation. Engage everybody. And one of the things that we did that I highly recommend is we offered monthly dialogue practice. Ben in Kentucky and me in Massachusetts. We gave everybody materials to read about the other group's regions. We showed videos about Kentucky and Massachusetts. We gave people dialogue books, dialogue handouts. We got them as ready as we could before they were going to meet the other. And I think all of these details strengthened the ripeness to meet the identified other and that they matter. We had 3 full days of consecutive dialogue. We had about 3 hours of dialogue each day, and it was interspersed with other activities that I also thought would challenge the unconscious biases of participants and help to bring people closer. We used art, music, theater, dance, anything I could think of, created all kinds of activities. Local sightseeing, a very successful public event I'll tell you about, endless potlucks, and the aforementioned homestays, all to help the group members see each other beyond their comfort zones, beyond their in-group bubbles, and to make a place at the table for these people with whom they so profoundly disagreed. It's a tall order. So point number 4 is there are many doors through which to challenge the straitjacket of tribal judgments, both within and outside of structured dialogue. To foster trust and commonality, I entered the dialogue process through the well-trod ground of family stories. I thought for a long time, how do I enter? What's the best way for a first dialogue? And I chose family stories. It turned out we have very different family stories and very different family histories. Many families in the U.S., Massachusetts, are relatively recent arrivals in the U.S., so many of our participants were first, second, or third generation Americans. Many of the Kentucky families, none of our participants had ever met an immigrant or refugee, and certainly never sat through what they heard, which was an impassioned, tear-filled, first-generation Holocaust story by one of our Massachusetts members. One of the Kentuckians remarked, "I was taught to hate and fear refugees and immigrants. I never met one. I will never think that way again." Those from Massachusetts had never encountered coal miners' families, nor understood the pride and the accomplishments that accompanied the suffering of those whose families lived and worked in coal mines, died from black lung, fallen boulders, generation after generation of brothers, fathers, grandfathers dying in the mines, and we never heard stories like that. It was as alien to us as the Holocaust story was to the Kentuckians. Each group had to find, fresh language to acknowledge each other's suffering and to think about the conditions that create a life and create a voting record. And a carefully constructed first day format was necessary because on the second day, we got into the hard issues, the hot button issues of the election, the new president, and the polarization of our country. Each side strained to listen to beliefs that collided with their realities. Although everyone recognized that we were not going to change reds into blues or blues into reds, some people wanted to scream and still want to scream, or blame, or convince, and we had to stay far away from attempting that. Participants hated each other's votes, but they had come to like each other, which created, I would say, a certain amount of cognitive dissonance in how they could think about each other. By the end of the weekend, the participants understood what had created the votes. They were also able to understand that each person in the circle is a dignified human being, to use that dignity word again, much more dimensional than a vote for or against Trump, immigration, guns, or abortion. A local bridge building event during the weekend shifted the tension. We had a public invitation from Massachusetts and 300 people showed up, which surprised everyone, especially the Kentuckians. They spoke to this huge audience with courage and honesty about their lives and struggles. The audience was responding to them with standing ovations, creating a kind of a positive feedback loop. So the more they got received, the more they spoke, the more they spoke, the more they got received. And the stories were passionate, and it brought forth a kind of web of enmity shift from enmity to a web of mutual recognition of each other's humanity. Very interesting story from a woman named Gwen, very revealing. She's a coal miner's daughter, probably in her 50s. She said, "I have been waiting all my life to vote for a woman president. I didn't care which party she was from. But Trump promised to bring back coal, and Hillary threatened to shut down the mines. Coal put shoes on our babies' feet and food in their bellies. In the end, I could not betray my community. I voted for Trump." After 3 days of this kind of dialogue and relationship strengthening, the Kentuckians returned. We were immediately besieged by these 300 people in Western Mass saying, "Give us an evening, talk to us, tell us what happened in the closed dialogues." So we spent an evening with 100 of them, and then they said, "Well, now teach us how to do dialogue." So in the winter, I set up sessions of dialogue training, and I spent the entire winter months training many, many groups of people in learning rudimentary skills of dialogue. They're now using them in their families, because there are so many divided families politically, as well as in their workplaces and communities. So that's starting to spread. And we did another evening for them when we came back from Kentucky so that they would be able to build more empathy and have, again, more compassion for the Kentucky situation. And one of the things that we learn as peace builders, one of the rules, is we have to have more people and key people. That's kind of a mantra in this work for success. Our public events drew these hundreds of people. We went around in Massachusetts and Kentucky, meeting local officials, state government officials, as many people as we could. And we've also benefited a lot from media. A European group found us and spent 3 days this summer in Massachusetts and then 3 days in Kentucky, which they flew me down to Kentucky. And they're going to do a program on the 2nd anniversary of Trump's inauguration, and we're going to be their feature in a 52-minute television story, which they say will be seen by millions. We'll see, but whatever, it's going to be quite exciting. We've also had an inquiry from a Dutch newspaper, one of their leading newspapers, and they're doing a front-page set of stories about us. And the Boston Globe has also been covering us, plus a lot of local media. We've also done a lot of social media. We have a website, and we've had some rural red state media, which has been very important for us because we want to reach red states as well. We're hoping that national media could do even more. It's a challenge I throw out to AFP to think about how can AFP help us in this issue of greater visibility for domestic peace building. We're going to need that. So 6 months later, in April, we went south to Kentucky for 3 days, and we went to a town where everyone is a descendant of coal mine, and they describe themselves as having coal dust in their veins. That's their self-description. We were very warmly welcomed by our hosts. They wanted to share their mountain culture, their music, and their hospitality with us. Their community did not come out in droves the way ours did. They were a little more hesitant, I think a little more fearful. But some of them came out. And I thought at the end of 3 days that we were going to be done with our project. And we weren't. Nobody wanted to end. My timer wants me to end, but I got a few more minutes. So I hope that's okay. Is that okay? Okay, so we didn't end. We spent the last day on key point number 6 in peace building, which is move into action. And we brainstormed a lot of action groups, and we've got all sorts of joint projects going on now. So we're continuing to be engaged with the Kentuckians. And I did a lot of evaluation, followed some evaluation instruments, and they've done very well on things like motivation, skills, connection to others, etc. And the Kentuckians want to come back. They've asked for a repeat. They want to come back in the spring, and we're discerning the viability of that. And if we do that, we'll try to get more key people and influencers and also bring in much more media. And I'm starting a new project. I'm also starting a project on race, a dialogue on race between South Carolina and Massachusetts, because I have a contact who in Beaufort County knows both the black and white communities. I have an African-American co-trainer from South Carolina, and the Massachusetts group is very high-powered, and they're meeting already, and we're looking even beyond the dialogue with South Carolina to developing a very important group in Massachusetts that's focusing on race. So it goes on and on. That's going to happen in January in South Carolina and next June in Massachusetts. So that's a very exciting thing to me, and that's another key point, which is keep testing out the model. This is my second test of this model. I've got a query from North Carolina, which might be the third, but can only do one at a time. So that's what's happening. So I'm going to carry this award back home to our Massachusetts group and share it with our Kentucky group. They're all sort of very eager to hear about this, and then take it into the new project and hope that race, which is tougher than politics, I think, will be another satisfactory opportunity for people to bridge their differences and create a little bit of peace together. I think we need to act boldly and decisively, because at some point the gaps between us become too dangerous and impossible to cross. So I encourage all of you, do what you can to build bridges. Thank you very much for this honor.
So a person who needs no introduction is Bridget Moix from Peace Direct.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for being here. I work with Peace Direct, and Peace Direct works with local people to stop violent conflict and build lasting peace. We believe local peace builders are the experts on the problems that their communities face, and we know that they have the solutions. We call local peace builders our partners, but they are really our heroes. It's my tremendous honor today, this afternoon, to present the finalists in our annual Global Awards competition, the Tomorrow's Peacebuilders Awards. This is the 5th year that Peace Direct has done this awards globally, and we had over 300 applications from local peace builders around the world applying this year. It was a record number. From that number, 9 finalists were selected to receive a visit to the United States, to visit New York and talk to people at the UN, to visit Washington, D.C., talk to all of you, and to be here for the awards ceremony. From those 9, an independent jury then selected 3 final cash prize winners who will receive a $10,000 check today. So to introduce the finalists and the Tomorrow's Peacebuilders Awards, we have a brief video. Thank you. So I want to introduce now my colleague Christine Trilliana, who will introduce each of the representatives of the 9 organizations and the categories, and they'll come to the stage for a short dialogue.
Thank you, Bridget. So for this week, I had the privilege of being in New York at the UN meetings with our Peacebuilders, and now here in DC to introduce them to you all here at the Alliance for Peacebuilding. When I call your name, if you could please just come up and remain standing. So from our first category, nonviolent action, from Nepal, Dr. Chatra Amachya of Nagarik Awas. Dr. Chatra is a medical doctor who helped deliver 10,000 babies in the rural areas of Nepal. From Colombia, Mariana Diaz-Kraus of Movilizatorio. Mariana's worked in both the public and private sectors for the economic security of vulnerable populations, armed conflicts, and peace building, particularly after the 2016 Colombian Peace Agreement. From India, Megha Desai of Self-Employed Women's Association. Megha manages programs to help rebuild lives after war and other disasters in India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Afghanistan. From our second category, woman-led peace building, from the US, Monica Kirka of Activate Labs. The organization is based in the US, but it also works in Latin America and has worked with organizations in Syria. From Colombia, Charo Mina Rojas of Proceso Comunidades de Negra. The organization is 25 years old and made of over 100 Afro-descendants, grassroots organizations, and community councils. And from Syria, Najla Sheikh of Karimat. Najla has told me that before she believed peace was just a word that politicians used around, but it wasn't until she saw Syrian women begging in the streets, and when she decided that they needed jobs, she needed to help them, that's when she found herself doing peace building before she understood what peace building meant. Next, I will introduce you to Sausan Abuzer. She wears many hats with us in Peace Direct. On her own time, she's a Lebanese peace journalist. But in addition, she was also part of the Peace Direct jury for tomorrow's Peacebuilders Awards. She will be translating for Najla, and she is also holding the Yemeni flag because, as I introduce our next category, the next finalist, he wasn't able to come. His name is Yahya Ali Maknoun, and he's from Yemen. And because of the executive order currently in the United States, we were unable to bring him over here to celebrate with the rest of the finalists. I'll have to backtrack a bit. Yahya and his organization, the Volunteer for Culture and Peace Foundation, is part of the youth-led peace-building finalist organizations. The next finalists that I'd like to introduce, originally we were going to have Ms. Duha Al-Musadar from Palestine representing Save Youth Future Society. However, we also came up against obstacles to try and get her a visa. So last minute, but very well welcomed, is Sahar Sarsour, who is right now staying in Burke, Virginia, and is a George Mason Fellow. And finally, last but not least, is Walgat Kuth from South Sudan. representing Young Adult Empowerment Initiative. Gatwal is a South Sudanese refugee currently living in Uganda.
Thank you so much, Christine. So now we want to take a few minutes. I wish we had all evening because the stories of the work and the communities that they work with and the incredible leadership they offer would certainly keep us riveted, I think, all evening. We have a short period of time, and so what we thought we'd do before we make the big final announcement is really have a moment to hear from all of the local peace builders who are finalists in the competition with one question, actually. And the question comes from certainly my heart, because when I say that these are my heroes and sheroes, it is truly from the heart. Because I think while we talk about and are experiencing deep division in the United States, I certainly don't live with the kind of tensions and violence and conflict that communities that you all work with do. And so I wonder, could I do it? And my goodness, how would I sustain hope? What would inspire me? And these are all hopeful, joyful people. We can tell you that because we've been spending the last few days with them. And so it's remarkable, and I think it's incredibly powerful, that source of hope for all of us and for our peace-building work. So we want to ask each of the local peace builders to reflect for a few minutes with us about what inspires you and gives you hope. And we'll do this by categories of the competition, but we've told them to really share whatever they'd like to share. So, Chatra, beginning with you and this work of nonviolent action and peace building and bringing these together, what gives you hope in this?
Thank you, Bridget. I represent Nagarik Awaz. This is a peace building organization in Nepal, working for 17 years. And it, in fact, was founded due to the need of the insurgency, the Maoist insurgency, which started in 2001. And we work to capacitate, encourage, and engage young adults and women for just and peaceful society. Save seed in times of famine, goes a Nepali saying, emphasizing on the need to be proactive and act accordingly. Following this maxim, founder of Nagarik Awaz, Rita Thapa, propounded the philosophy of save youth in the times of war and took initiative for the constructive mobilization and engagement of youth in various peace-building initiatives. Sustaining peace, as you said, over post-conflict is not easy. It is even more difficult when this time stretches in transitory states. And we had Maoist insurgents for 10 years, and it took 9 years for the government to establish the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and Commission for the investigation of the forcibly disappeared. And in these 3 years also, still, it is just a lip service. We feel, and the people who are affected, they feel. So it is even more difficult when the time stretches in transitory states. We may lay down arms and initiate an official peace process requiring many layers of political and technical work, but helping together lives that have come asunder through killings, disappearances, war crimes, and social turbulence is not easy. Yet the resilience and the fortitude of the human spirit never fail to amaze us all. And our people, the conflict-affected women and young people, they are resilient and they are leaders of their own. We had local election and many of the women are holding position in the locally, in the metropolitan and in the provincial, this thing. And many of our young leaders, they have founded their own organization and spreading hope and inspiring others. And in all this, there is little hand-holding, some support, and solidarity. Solidarity is the key, and that may ease the owner's journey. It gives immense joy and hope to see the youth of Nepal transform from the revenge and hatred mode to that of the mode of being peace ambassadors. We have 3,000 peace ambassadors working as peace builders in the community and inspiring thousands more to become agents of peace. Lastly, I would like to say, coming together is the beginning. Staying together is progress. And working together is success. Looking forward to working together with all the peace builders of the world for a just and peaceful world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to just pass the microphone and for each of you to speak to us about hope and what inspires you in your work and your lives.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for Peace Direct and all the partners and everything to have us here. We're beyond excited, and I can talk for the entire group. We're really, really happy. For us, actually, I will talk to you from the bottom of my heart as a Colombian. As a Colombian, from a very young age, you get to know what violence is, and violence and conflict has become part of our DNA. Part of our everyday life, and nothing becomes actually extraordinary. It just becomes part of everything. So bombs explode and you just ask, oh, that must have been a big one because the windows shattered in your home, or you had to be evacuated because in the 90s there were so many threats about bombs, car bombs and stuff. And also then the mix with the armed conflict and with the really strong roots of social injustice and stuff. And you just become to see that it's normal. But then at one point when you have the privilege to actually open your eyes and see that this is not normal and that we should do something to change it, and you start finding people that are working towards change, and you start knowing of cases that work under extreme circumstances, and you become to hear stories of victims and of ex-combatants, and you say, oh my God, if they could do it, what am I doing about it? And also you start to recognize that the engine behind that transformation, of that change, is a person. So how do we make this bigger? How do we get that engine to be so powerful that it can actually move social change, transform a country completely, or transform the world? And that's the idea that we have at the end of the line in our organization, is how do we empower collective participation, how do we empower citizen engagement, and how are we doing this through social innovation and using technology, and how do we convince every citizen that they have the power to change their reality? It doesn't matter where you are, who you are, but you have the power to do it. You just have to get up, start, and things will be falling into place and being so powerful that you can actually really see impacts quite quickly. And in our experience, we went to the regions of Colombia, post-conflict Colombia, trying to do a project with innovation technology in these regions where everybody was telling us, you want to do technology in rural Colombia or post-conflict territories of Colombia, that is completely impossible. You will not have any internet service, people will not be engaged by this, and then some donors believed in us, and we started, and we proved everybody wrong, happily, and we found that these regions had so many young leaders that were so inspired and knew more about technology than ourselves. Or we got to a pilot project where we wanted to test an app for social leader protection, and more than 60 women come in, more than 70 in a year, and all of them had smartphones and knew exactly how to use it and how useful it would be, not only for as human rights defenders, but against gender violence. So that is what gives me hope every day, is that in Colombia, and I think in the world, but I speak of my little corner of the world, every day you find something inspiring. Every day you find something that sheds a little bit more light than shadow. So that's what gives me inspiration.
Good afternoon and namaste. I am Megha Desai from Self-Employed Women's Association, SEVA. We are an organization registered in India. We are organizing the women of informal sector who are among the poorest of the poor for the twin objectives of full employment and self-reliance. And by full employment, we mean that women should have work security, income security, household security, social security. And by self-reliance, we mean that women can decide for themselves, for their children, family, and a society as a whole. We believe in Gandhian philosophy, and as Gandhiji said, that if the non-violence is the law of our being, then future is in hands of women. And we believe that it's very true, working not only in India, but in Asian countries, mainly war-torn countries of Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. So we believe that if constructive work of women gives not only the food security, income security, but it also views the society as a whole. And work brings peace to not only the women, but households and community as a whole. We are working in India in 18 states, where some states are recurring disaster-prone, man-made or natural disaster. Together with that, we also work in Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar since last 10 years. And the sister-to-sister approach of work has helped us to believe that women, work, and peace. That is the way of peace building, be it in India or any other fragile country. Thank you very much.
So I studied at Brandeis under Mari Fitzduff, and she would always say, if you wanted applause, you should have joined the circus and not be a peace builder. And I think we're betraying her today, but I think she'll be okay with this. Here we are. What gives me hope, in our work, when we enter into spaces that are pretty violent on borders or in detention centers, we always say we want to show up like hope. But what does that look like? What gives me hope are people that, when confronted with darkness, with violence and oppression, they don't run towards the darkness, but they run towards the light. So I want to bring into this room 3 or 4 women that give me hope in our work. The first one, her name is Myra. She, for the last 4 years, has fed over 9,000 migrants that have been released from ICE in McAllen, Texas. She works with Catholic Charities. She opened up her space to let Activate Labs join her, where we did our rapid response creative trauma healing spaces. And her vision of seeing the unseen, she sees things and dynamics that you only get a little bit later. Her vision for what dignity looks like for migrants gives me a lot of hope. I also want to bring into this room Teresa Smith, who I've been training with and working with for about 5 years. Teresa Smith's son, Cesar Cruz, was killed by Anaheim police. That's a city in Southern California. He was still strapped in his seatbelt. He wasn't on parole and probation. He was shot 15 times in the back by police, by 4 officers. He left 5 sons in his wake and a wife. And Teresa Smith looked towards the light, and she walked towards it. She wrote a letter of forgiveness to the 4 officers. And she said, I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me, because I need my liberation. Teresa Smith gives me a lot of hope. 2 women in Tecate, we've trained over 1,000 women in northern Mexico, and 2 women in Tecate, we trained them to be facilitators. We were so excited. We went in the first workshop that they were co-facilitating with me. We went into their community, and there was a full-on conflict, close to being physical. And this was their first peace-building workshop. But they powered through. It was a 3-hour mini workshop. And at the end, when we were debriefing, Elsa said, one of the women said, I didn't want hate to win today. So I knew we had to stay focused. I didn't want hate to win. So her desire for hate not to win that day, and we'll work tomorrow and the next day and the next day, that gave me a lot of hope. The last woman, I don't know her name, but when we were at the border in Tijuana, when the first migrant caravan came in April, we brought art supplies, and what we try to do is take up a lot of space for people that are unseen and unheard and powerless. And so we're taking over this space where migrants are, and we're not supposed to be, and we're annoying to the police and annoying to immigration, annoying to everybody, but kids are playing and painting, and we're saying like we belong here. And this lady sat down, this young lady, maybe 25, she sat down with her two babies, and this was, painting for kids. We have canvas. She sat down with her 1-year-old and her 3-year-old, and she painted as if she was like in her art studio somewhere for 3 hours, just quietly painted. And not only us, but the media noticed, and people were gathering around her. And she started telling her story that she worked in a nail salon in Honduras. And she is the first time she could return back to herself. So this young lady, the resilience to return back to herself in the middle of a tent camp on the border with the United States in Mexico, her resilience gives me a lot of hope. I think we can honor them today too. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to bring greetings from our Black and Afro-descendant traditional territories in Colombia. Our greeting from joy, hope, and freedom. I'm a member of the Black Communities Process in Colombia, a nationwide grassroots organization that works with Afro-descendant communities. And I have two sources of encouragement and hope, and what nurtured me in times when we feel like everything is lost and we feel like we just don't want to even get out of bed. One is the collective spirit of our struggle to keep defending life, and particularly life and dignity. So what we do in our work every single day, the women, the communities, the different organizations that are part of this work and this struggle is day by day be defending life. Life of human beings, life of all living beings, including the territories, the land, which is also a how do you say that? A living self? a living being, thank you. A living being. So that is very powerful to me because, as you say, even I am dealing with situations that are very complex, but I'm not in the situations that many people are, and particularly women, every day in territories completely encroached by armed groups, by militarized presence. And what they do every single day is get up and start working, and everything they do is defending life and defending the dignity of that life. And that is a huge encouragement and teaching moment every single time I'm in these spaces with all these people. So, and this is a collective spirit. It's nothing individual. It's every single person do it, and this has a collective impact. But the other source of encouragement and that nurture me every single minute is the history I come from. Because I am like a living testimony of what resilience, of what hope, of what courage, and what value of life is. I come from Afro-descendant people that was brought to Colombia to be enslaved, and they struggle and they survive, and thanks to them, I am here. So the power of my ancestors and what they did to keep us alive and for me to be here and be continuing bringing people over. And I'm finishing. and the things that they were teaching and contributing to build in the country are things that every single day are source of that power for me.
مرحبا. أحياناً من كتر الأخبار السيئة ومن كتر التعب اللي بنمر فيه بكون ماشية بالطريق بقعد في الأرض على الرصيف وكأني الامرأة الوحيدة وببلش ببكي للحظة بمر شريط قدام عيوني وبيذكرني إنه شو عملنا. بتذكر كيف قدرنا نأمن فرص عمل ل400 امرأة، ساعدناهم إنهم يتمكنوا اقتصادياً وهن صاروا هن المعيلين لعيالهم. بتذكر كيف قدرنا نجمع 100 امرأة كانت متسولة في الشوارع وكمان ساعدناها إنه تمتلك مهنة وأمنا لها فرص عمل. بتذكر كيف سكرنا 30 بيت دعارة لبنات صغار ما إلهم علاقة بكل هالاسم، بس هن فقط الحرب فرضت عليهم يكونوا بهذا المكان لأنه الفقر والجوع كتير قاسي. بتذكر كيف قدرت إنه أبعد أولادي، ابني الكبير الحسين ورفقاته عن التسليح وإنه ينضم للحرب ويرجع للمدارس. وبتذكر كمان كيف أمهات الشهداء اللي موجودين بمنطقتنا بكلس عم يستنوني لحتى بس اسمعهم ويحكوا لي قصصهم وامسك بإيدهم. بتذكر كمان رفقاتي اللي موجودين بالسجون، المعتقلين والمعتقلات. وبتذكر الشهداء اللي استشهدوا بحرب سوريا وبقول خلص، بمسح عن دموعي وبقول خلص لازم نكمل ولازم نستمر ولازم ما نبكي، وهي الدموع نحولها لقوة وإرادة لحتى تنتهي كل الحروب من كل العالم ولحتى يعم السلام. هذا لحاله بيعطيني أمل كتير كبير، ووجودي هون بهي اللحظة وبهذا المكان وبهذا المسرح هو أكبر أمل لحتى نستمر. شكراً.
Hi, I bet you understood what she said because you could read it on her face. But to tell you what Najla said, she said with all the bad news around and with all the pressure of the bad news and the news of the war back home in Syria, and she is in Turkey, so sometimes she's walking in the street and she feels like a huge burden. So she sits down and she cries. And it's all dark around, even if the sky is clear blue. She has like this moment of crying, and then she realizes what she has achieved. She sees everything clear. She remembers the 400 women who became the sole bread providers for their families, how they became economically empowered. She remembers saving 60 women from begging into the streets because they had no means. She remembers closing 30 prostitution houses that employed young Syrian teenagers who knew nothing, and they became victims of war and they had to survive by selling their bodies. All these women are now empowered. They have career and they know they are not victims, they are heroes. And she also remembers her 2 sons and how she could save her eldest son, Hussein, from going back to Syria to fight against ISIS, Daesh, and from being transported himself into a fighter. Now her eldest son is going to the university. And she thinks about the mothers of all the martyrs and her friends, male and female friends under prison, and back home in Syria, and all the ones that disappeared and whose fate is unknown. And then she transforms her tears into a force of hope, and she stands up and she knows how many people are relying on her, so she continues. And this gives her hope. And her moment here gives her hope. And I want to add something. Her phone didn't stop all the way. It's her family, mother, father, brother, everyone, and they are telling her how proud they are of her. And I am proud of you too, and everyone here on stage is proud of you. So I'm keeping the mic, and to have another emotional moment, and to talk about a brilliant young man, Yahya. I had the privilege of interviewing him as a jury member, and it was emotional and tense. And keep in mind, he's from Yemen, from the Middle East, and it's, well, men in our part of the world don't get emotional, they don't cry because it's a womanly behavior. But he was about to cry when he told me the story of his brother whose fate is unknown, and the story of his niece waiting for her father every day. During the interview that lasted like for about 45 minutes, I cannot remember how many times he repeated, "We are forgotten, we are forgotten. نحن منسيون." We are forgotten in Arabic. And think about it, he is right. I mean, how well do we know Yemen? And what do we know about Yemen, except well-being what is called the backyard of Saudi Arabia, and the stage where a proxy war is taking place between Saudi Arabia and Iran. But it's much more than that. So I will tell you a little about Yahya and his colleagues. They have established the first library for peace in Yemen, and I think it's the first in the Middle East. And they are sending young female volunteers, students abroad to study peace building and conflict resolution. And they are all females because they believe in the new Yemen, in a new democratic Yemen that should come one day, like Syria. Women should have a leading role in society and building peace in one of the most conservative areas in the world. So this is a story about Yemen that most of you, most of us don't know much about. And peace is a tough choice in Yemen. Peace is a life-threatening path. The easiest way is to get involved into war in Yemen. But Yahya and his colleagues didn't do it. Peace has become a lifestyle for them, and it gives them hope every day. The love of Yemen gives them hope. So please, I urge you, Yahya is not here, but he will see this. So I urge you to prove him wrong, that Yemen is not forgotten and it shouldn't be forgotten, and that maybe one day, very soon, he should be here himself speaking about Yemen. But first, of course, he should be allowed in the West, in the US, and granted visa.
Thank you, Sosan. It seems like there is so much inspiration spread around. Okay, hello everybody. I've been here for only 2 months and a half, like doing a fellowship here, sponsored by State Department. And it's the first time for me to leave my country, Gaza. During my stay here, I've been asked so many questions about being cool. I mean, so many people ask me how you can be so positive and cool, and at the same time you laugh and smile so much while you came from the largest open-air prison in the world, which is Gaza. And absolutely told them, of course, having a supporting family is something that makes me like that. I have a very supporting family who I call them every day in order to just to get motivation from them. And my parents keeps telling me that you can do something, and you are something, and you can do a change in the world. I also have witnessed 2 wars in my life, and I couldn't forget the cries and the screams of the children. My nieces and little sister, when they got scared because of bombings, and they wanted me to protect them. Of course, that gives me motivations that there is something in the world that could be changed. Also, the miserable life that all of the Gazan people are living and passing through, including the shortage of electricity. They only have 4-hour electricity a day, and they have restrictions upon movement. They couldn't travel and see the world. So actually, this gives me motivation to go and keep going. Yeah, and also. I lost so many friends who are journalists. They lost their lives and made sacrifices because they did their jobs, and they want to do something for their community. I don't want to lose more beloved people. The organization that I'm working with is they have 1,500 volunteers. They are doing their jobs without being paid, and the only thing that they want to do is just to make a change in their community. Also, so many people make connection between being a terrorist and being a Palestinian, which makes me feel bad, and at the same time gives me motivation that there would be someone to change this. And last thing that I also always set myself a reminder, and I tell myself so many times that it falls upon a generation to be great. We can be a generation, you can be a generation to be great also. That what I want to say and also always remind myself of is everyone can build peace. It's not difficult, and it's not easy as well, but it makes lots of efforts, and I'm sure that one hand cannot make a clap. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My name is Katwal. I'm from South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, or you call it baby nation. And as many of us knows here, that a baby always have a lot of problem. And I think this is what my country is going through. So we are facing a lot of problem, baby challenges. 3 years ago, I co-founded a youth-led organization called the Young Adult Empowerment Initiative, a call for action to empower youth to transform their community. We work in refugee camps in Uganda, where over 2 million refugees from the regions are being hosted, and over 70% of the total population are from Sudan, or are from South Sudan, and that is equivalent to 1.4 million South Sudanese living in Uganda. At the same time, we work in protection of civilian sites within South Sudan, run by United Nations Mission in South Sudan, or UNMISS, with IDPs. What inspired me most, or what gave me hope to work for peace in my country, is the concept that peace is not political. So peace is something local, and you have to begin building peace within the grassroots. So, for instance, we have been in war for many years, and there has been a lot of political agreement that has been signed. For many of you have been reading about South Sudan, but none of them has materialized. But with our work, we are able, to empower young people, to prevent them from joining, conflict. Being recruited in the army. And we also give them vocational trainings that keep them busy. You cannot train young people and tell them that you be in the community peacefully without them doing anything for themselves. So there must be something that keep them busy, like, make them get employed or share alliances. And this concept, we call it peace enterprise. So this is what we are doing in Uganda refugee camps, at the same time in South Sudan's IDPs camps. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What gives me hope is all of you and all of you. And you can see that Peace Direct's biggest problem is raising enough money to give awards to everyone that deserves them for great, wonderful local peace building work. I'm going to invite my colleague in our last minute, Scarlett, to come up and announce the cash prize, and as we celebrate all the local peace builders.
So I feel very privileged to be standing up here and reading these out. So the three winners of the cash prize are, in the women-led peacebuilding group, Charamina Rojas from PCN Colombia, that's Proceso Comunidades de Negra. From the youth-led peacebuilding group, it's Gatwal Gatkuth from South Sudan. And from the Nonviolent Action and Peacebuilding group, it's Mariana Diaz-Kraus from Colombia. I'd like to just ask you all if you please want to stick around, because we're going to be having a reception downstairs at the WeWork space. So please come and mingle with the Peacebuilders and find out a lot more about what they do. And now I'd really like to ask you all to give out all of our 9 finalists a final round of applause. And just to let you know that that's after this is over, not right now. There's another speaker.
Sorry. So I know it's a little late, and there's a happy hour. It's actually on the 10th floor, I believe, not down below. Yeah. Okay. All right. So thank you so much. That's what it is. We have one last speaker. Her name is Jin In. She's incredibly powerful. I'm not going to introduce her. Her bio is in your app. You will walk out of here so empowered if you stay and listen to her. I can promise you that. Jin In.
Hello. I am between you and reception. So I will try to make it as powerful as the people that I work with, my tribe. But first, I want to thank Liz. I was sitting in another conference with my tribe, which you will soon find out, and the person who was next to me found out what I do, and she said, "You should speak." And I told her I do. And she said, "You should speak at a peace conference." So literally, I wrote down Alliance for Peacebuilding, because 1 year ago, I spoke at this conference on International Day of the Girl, gives away what I do. And I literally wrote down Liz. It's what I wrote on a piece of paper. The next day, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate was announced, and I got an email from Liz. This is how it happens. So I want to thank Liz. I want to begin by saying that, America, we love wars. We have war on poverty, we have war on drugs. We also have war on terror. And currently, I believe there's a war on truth. And in this era of fake news, we must be truth seekers and truth tellers. And for me, I seek and tell the truth about one very important cause, and no matter what you do in peace building, this is at the core of all the problem, and that's gender and power. So I say the problem is power, but the solution is empower. So I start my talks with a very simple question. If you heard me speak, do not answer. But if you have not heard me speak, it's a very simple question. Are there more males or are there more females in the world today? If you think there's more males, this is late evening, please stand up. I want you to look around the room. No one is standing. I want to make this clear. If you think there is more females in the room, please stand up. You must stand for one, males or females. You don't get a choice. I understand nowadays there's a lot of binary choices, but for this one you have to stand, males or females. In the world, that's right. Okay, so now you may stand. That was your exercise for the afternoon. Before your reception. So in 2018 I woke up, and this was my 2018 New Year's resolution and my mission in life. This must be corrected, and that's because there are more males in the world today. In fact, there are 66 extra males without females. And you may be laughing, and you may be thinking, what's the problem? But this is currently the greatest gender and power imbalance we are facing, and it is astronomically rising. So if you want to see proof, this is proof. This is actually the UN, United Nations population data, and the last time the planet was gender balanced was 1960. And look what is happening. It is plummeting. So today, that's how we ended up here. But you may be thinking, what's going on? How could this be? That's because we've killed more girls than total number of all the people who died in all the wars of the 20th century. We've killed more girls than all the people who've died of all the genocides of the 20th century. So if you don't believe me, here are just numbers. Numbers speaks truth to power. 5 genocides, that equates to about 20 million. And here are the number of girls we've killed. So I've been speaking for a while, but finally, this is getting attention. Washington Post had this article April of this year. Now, if you think this is just these 2 countries, you're wrong. In fact, this shows where the gender imbalance is the worst. Now, keep in mind of this map. And what you can't see, actually, there are certain countries that are even lighter, and that's in the Middle East. And in fact, in countries like Oman and Qatar and UAE, you have less than 30% females. So why is this a problem? Because there's 2 other crises that's going on, and that is currently we have the largest youth population. You could see the Middle East is 60%, South Asia is 2/3, 70% in Africa. In fact, in 30 years, every single country in Africa is going to double in size. What's interesting is that, so all the population growth is happening in about 9 concentrated countries, but there's one anomaly, all of them being in Asia, South Asia, and Middle East. There's one anomaly. Yay! United States of America. We seem to be the trajectory of also the youth growth. So here's the other problem and why you are all probably here. Because it is not an accident. The world is becoming much more violent, less free. And for a generation, many of the award recipients here and the finalists, all they've known is war. War has become global. What's interesting is that Valerie Hudson wrote a book, and she said the single greatest predictor of country going to war is not poverty, it's not lack of democracy or ethnic or religious strife. The single greatest predictor of country going to war is smart people? What? Men. All right. Very close. It's how they treat their women. It's violence against women. So here's another study Reuters produced. 10 most dangerous country for women. This is worth saying. Number 1, India. Number 2, Afghanistan. Number 3, Syria. Number 4, Somalia. Number 5, Saudi Arabia. Number 6, Pakistan. Number 7, DRC. Number 8, Yemen. Number 9, Nigeria. And look at the other anomaly, United States of America. We seem to be following this trend. Isn't that amazing? This map and this result is almost transposed with the other gender and power imbalance map we saw earlier. So I have a solution. We know the problem. What's interesting is those girls we've been killing are actually incredibly powerful. This is a World Bank report. 5 countries, 5 issue. You probably can't see it, but countries are not that important, but let's just say them for the sake of looking at the data. India, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Kenya. If we just invested in adolescent girls, 1 issue, do the math, this is about $500 billion into the global economy. But look at the cost of not educating a girl. $15 to $30 trillion loss. Now, if you think it's just development, this is actually a graph of global warming. When scholars came together and put together 100 solutions to turn back the climate change, number 1 solution, look at that, girls. So you may know that currently there is an explosion going on. We need superheroes. We don't have real life leaders that are telling truth and that are fighting for justice. So our young people are looking at superheroes. But I'm here to tell you, I work with real life superheroes. I've met them and I've seen them around the world. And I don't even have to tell you, because we know. Here's the protesters. Here's another Nobel Peace Prize laureate. This year's Nobel Peace Prize laureate. And even our own in United States of America, I got to meet these amazing, heroic young people, and their tagline, their hashtag is never again. This is the March on Washington that they asked us adults to be their mentors, but they didn't even need us. It was them that was leading this charge. I believe we have to take action now, and that's because there's another powerful counterforce to the power and gender imbalance, and that is called the Me Too movement. And they too became the Person of the Year in 2017. What's amazing about this movement is that this time it's not just women, it's with men. And they are partnering with us, they're walking with us, they're building the movement with us. And it's not just leaders. This is what a feminist looks like. And I follow them as well, because we really need every single person to change this story, change this narrative now. So this was the #1 item that was sold in New York Fashion Week. But actually, I don't think it's just about females. I think it is about the power or the lack of power that women have around the world. So it's really, the future is empowered females. It's not just having more females. If females do not have control, what would that do? But that's a very interesting word, empower. What does that actually mean? So this is my work. It is a movement. I think young people just get it. Every time they do anything, it's a hashtag. You know what a hashtag is? It's a movement. This is no longer about a project. It's no longer about one organization, one institution. It is about a sea change. So the mission is we target exactly what's at the core. What's at the core? Is it just the number of men? No. It's actually so easy and yet so hard. It's a toxic mindset that believes that girls are less valuable. They even dehumanize them, and then we can kill with impunity. So it's to target that mindset and transform it into a powerful new paradigm that realizes empowered girls are really a powerful force for change. I don't even have to collect this data. The development organizations are collecting it. But the action, the real action, which you all have demonstrated, is actually young women who are empowered and leading change. But what I've learned is this work is great for us, but the world is not recognized as fast enough. And I believe that's because we don't have data. We don't have data of what it is. So I started to collect this data, and the first ever we launched an empowerment survey targeting millennial women to see their agency and capacity. I'm not interested in how many girls are going to school. I'm interested, do they have control in their lives? And here are the countries. From Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, we heard their voices. We asked them, do you have education? How much education can you get? Do you have choices in your lives of relationship? Do you have control of your body? And how much choices and agency do you have in just day-to-day activity? If you think this is a Western phenomenon, it wasn't. Here, the religion that was represented. What was so interesting is we found that the word empowerment doesn't exist in any language but English. Isn't that remarkable? So we didn't even use the word empowerment. But here's what it looks like in picture. Equality is when you give equal level of everything. Equity is when you actually equal the leveling field. But empowerment is when there is no barrier, nothing. But actually, data show that empowerment is a process. It's a process these young women were going from I cannot to I can. That was remarkable. So how did they do it? How did they go from I cannot to I can? How did they face barrier every single day when the society and their parents and their own government say that they can't do something, but they wake up one morning and say, yes, I can? And that was not just President Obama's slogan. Actually, girls have been saying it for decades and millennials and for generations and generations. So here's the result. 7% came from families and friends. And look at the rest. Education, followed greater by experience. Empowerment, and this can-do factor, is just like any muscle in the body. The more you do it, the better you become. So it was through experience. But the number one factor, the number one tool that led them from going from I cannot to I can was self-awareness, self-awakening, knowing who they are. So I put the results in the form of a pyramid, just like the Maslow hierarchy of need. This is not brain science. This is not even rocket science. This data is just so obvious. Of course, Maslow said this long, long time ago, that this is how you build human, and we all strive for this, we strive for our greatest potential. Why would girls and young women in the poorest of the poor places not also strive their greatest potential? So I know earlier one of the speakers said that she didn't want to get heady. and give a lot of data, I agree with you. So I won't bore you with all the rich data that we've gathered about what they can do, what they can't do, how they do it, how do they practice their muscles, but here are 3 shocking truths. So first, this is worth writing down, but I don't recommend you pulling out your technology device. Education and empowerment are not causality. Education and empowerment is not causality. How many of you are in development field? Just raise your hands. Does this shock you? Because for most people who are working in development, if you're doing women's empowerment, girls' empowerment, you're educating girls. But here is what we found. Now, when I share this at universities and in conferences, women who are in rich countries actually agree. They realize that education and empowerment are not equal. It could help, it influences, but they get it. But here's the number 2, and this only proves more to the point, and that is that young women in rich countries are not more empowered than young women in poor countries. And in fact, I would actually argue that girls and young women in poor countries get to practice their muscles more and more frequently. And then here is the real shocking truth. The key to empowerment is not external, it's internal, which means it's the failure of society. It's us that has been stopping them. So that survey, I've been doing almost a speaking tour, trying to tell as many people as possible in conferences like this and actually at universities, because they are very interested in what really empowers and helps to create change makers. But that also unleashed national survey everywhere. So, of course, during the time that the Syrian war broke out and the young women all gathered and said, we want to collect data on us. We want to show the world how powerful we are. So they came to me, and spanning nearly 20 countries across the world, because all of them were immigrants and refugees and citizens of various different countries. We collected data. This might be the only one that isn't just centered in one country. And the same thing, have you made changes in your life? Half of them made changes. And a little less than half said no. What caused the change? And this group is even more remarkable. 3/4 of them said it was through themselves. And the rest, they were building muscles on how to create change. What's interesting is that negative experience also empowers them. And just to go through very quickly the summary of this, this is a remarkable group. How many of us wake up every day and we want to change something in our lives? Drink less coffee, exercise more, use less technology. Well, we ask them, do you believe your life can change? Do you believe Syria can change? All they've known in their young adult life is war. And here's what they said. Yes, they believe their life can change. Who contributes the most to making that change? Me. Then we asked them, what do you want to be? And we found out actually nearly 30% of them actually said they wanted to go into peace building. Just think about that. Let's ask American young people. Ask them, what do you want to be? Wall Street, technologist, probably not peace building. But nearly 30 of them actually said they wanted to be in peace building. So we summarize, we've learned the superpowers of these empowered young women. And that is, I call it 3 A's. One of them you actually asked all your recipients, aspiration and hope. Something about peace building, they're like built in, it's in their DNA. They have aspiration and hope. Accountability. They're not blaming their government. They're not even blaming donor governments. They're not even blaming the United States of America, which is quite surprising. They are saying, we want to create change, and they are taking action. So I want to end with this and why this data has become so important. Because at the root of all this, and currently this is being weaponized, it's fear. All of us have it. It's a human factor. And now what we're doing is we're collecting data. How do girls and young women in these war-torn countries, how do they face fear every single day and wake up resiliently? And for me, this is what we've learned through our data, that empowerment is a process that's transforming that fear. Now, I want to end with this because this is one of, talk about stories, I think it's always good to end on a story. We asked them, do you have a mentor? And I believe this is critical. How many of us have had mentors when we were young? Wow, that's a lot. I'm a huge fan of Mentor. And in our Syrian survey, it actually showed more than half of them actually had mentors. They had adult supporters who could help them. And that's how they've been building their resilient muscle. All the results and all the questions are on 4GGL. But why is this important? And I want to end with this. By the way, actually now the survey, there is a waiting list of nations who have now come to me and said, we want to collect this data in our country. And it's absolutely remarkable. And this has now become my life mission. My life mission is to literally illuminate our dark world with the inner power of girls. And the countries have been Afghanistan to Iran, Saudi Arabia, and something that I thought I will never see the day, North Korea. We're going to gather this data, we're going to share it with the world, or how powerful they really are. And so in closing, I know this story because I was one of those girls that was born in one of the poorest countries on this planet. When I was born, the GDP of my birth country was less than that of all of you that's sitting here. And in my lifetime, I saw it to go from one of the poorest countries to today, which is the 11th largest world economy, and that's South Korea. Now, interestingly, at the age of 7 months, my father passed away. And in poor countries, as some of you may know, you don't have any value, and if you don't have a father, you have no value. But that wasn't my destiny, and that wasn't even the destiny of my birth country. We transformed, and these mentors, these amazing women championed me, and I got to rewrite my story. And when I came at the age of 8 years old to the United States, this mentor came into my life, and she said, I must have told her I couldn't do something because I was a girl. And she actually literally erased the word C-A-N-N-O-T out of the vocabulary. For someone, English is my second language. That word didn't literally exist until I was 15 years old and I went to middle school and I learned, actually that word does exist. Other people use it. But until then, I literally thought that word didn't exist. And now I totally see why the data show that it is that process of going from I cannot to I can. But she said, that doesn't exist. And she took my hand and she said, come with me. You're going to change your world. We call it community service. She taught me social justice action at the age of 8. And that's how she transformed my mind and my action. What's remarkable is that as an adult, actually, I learned that my dad, who passed away, his family comes from a handful of family who owns all the land of South Korea. But the minute he dies, none of it goes to girls. And what's remarkable is that in my lifetime, I saw an example of what happens when you don't invest in human capital, and that's North Korea. So I want to end this talk, because I know you're all really excited about going to the reception, is that we're all peace builders and we're all healers and we are also change makers. And I want to end with the Hopi elders' prophecy. This is an old prophecy, but I couldn't help but to see the relevance of it today. We have been saying that it's the 11th hour. Now it's the hour. It's time to speak your truth. But first, there are things to consider. Where are you living? What are you doing? Who are your relationships with? Gather yourselves. Create your community. The time for a lone wolf is over. Banish the word struggle from your vocabulary. All that you do, do it sacredly and in celebration. But don't take anything personally, least of us ourselves, because the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. And do not look outside of yourself for your leader. You are the ones we have been waiting for. You are the ones who we have been waiting for. Thank you.
So was I right? She's amazing. You all are amazing. Thank you so much. And now, happy hour. Where? It's downstairs. I was totally wrong before. We hope